Let me start by talking a bit about the title that we have given to this lecture, Mars and Venus, or Planet Earth. Now, you all know what that refers to, I'm assuming. That refers to the book by John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Now, you all pretty much know the argument. How many of you have actually read that book? Let me see your hands. This is a very typical response. Most of the time, people, like, everybody knows the argument, but very few people have actually, like, own up that they've read it. Let me tell you something about that book, Mars and Venus, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. That book is the single best-selling self-help book in the history of the world. That book alone has sold 18 million copies in hardcover. That book, and that doesn't even include the spin-off books, you know, like Mars and Venus in the boardroom, Mars and Venus in the bedroom. There should be Mars and Venus in the bathroom, don't you think? There's, you know, and all of the other things, the DVDs, the videotapes, the audio tapes, the pen and pencil sets, bumper stickers, baseball hats, board game, short-lived TV show, and therapy franchise. You can actually be trained to do Mars and Venus therapy. You go out to Northern California, to headquarters, where else? And as I've been told, that training takes 2 days. And then you send some cut back to corporate headquarters. Now, here's the thing about that book. Everyone knows the argument. The argument is that men and women are so fundamentally different that we might as well be from different planets. That men and women are so different that any amount of communication between women and men is an event of intergalactic proportions. Now, here's the thing about that book. Every day that you are here as a student at Middlebury, you are living the refutation of that book. How do I know this? What is the most successful educational reform of the entire 19th and 20th century? Coeducation, exactly. And what does coeducation assume? It assumes you can sit in the same class, read the same text, listen to the same lecture, take the same exam, and be graded by the same criteria. And nobody, but nobody, ever goes to the dean of students and says, well, like, I'm a Martian and my professor's a Venusian, so, like, don't I get extra credit, or at least a translator? Nobody says this. Why? Because what we know in behavioral and social science is that on every available, every measurable trait, attitude, behavior, women and men are far more similar than we are different. That is what every social and behavioral scientist knows. There may be some small mean differences, but the real story in gender is the variations among men and the variations among women, which are much greater than any small differences that you might find in mean scores between women and men. So do you think you'd sell 18 million copies in hardcover of a book called We're All Earthlings? I don't think so. I think there's something in our culture, something in where we are, who we are, that wants desperately to believe that there is some fundamental, irreducible difference between women and men. Now, my argument to you tonight is not only are men and women more similar than we are different on every available measurable trait, attitude, and behavior, but in fact, we are also more similar than we are different politically. That is, that we are not, there's no war between the sexes, battle between the sexes, that in fact men and women can and should be allies. That the very things that women have identified that they need to live the lives they say they want to live are the things that we men also need to live the lives that we say we want to live. So that's going to be the argument that I want to make to you. Now, I do have another title for this lecture that sort of describes my own thinking about it, so I thought I would share that with you. Because I want you to sort of get a sense of my own personal evolution thinking about these issues. And it starts 16 years ago, in October of 1991, when Clarence Thomas was nominated for his seat on the Supreme Court. And Anita Hill came forward to talk about what happened to her when she worked for Thomas at the EEOC. And some of you who are old enough to remember that may remember what happened to Anita Hill when she came forward. after the shameful way that the Senate Judiciary Committee treated her. They said she was a woman scorned. They said she made the whole thing up. Some said that she even fantasized it. After the way they treated her, the media had this phrase for what was going to happen with women. And that phrase was a chilling effect. Do you remember that? This is the first time that phrase was used. This is going to have a chilling effect on American women. Women are going to be less likely to come forward to talk about sexual harassment, less likely to come forward to talk about what happens to them in the workplace. And my first question to you tonight is, have the media ever been more wrong? Because there has not been, not only has there not been a chilling effect, there has been a kind of national thaw. Women have been coming forward nonstop since 1991 to talk about these kind of issues. So in November of 1991, I wrote a little op-ed piece for my local newspaper, and it was called Clarence and Us. And I said, okay, guys, sexual harassment's on the agenda here. We really ought to talk about it. We don't know how to talk about it. Let's talk about what does it mean? How do we feel about it? And someone read that and said, would you come and give a lecture at my school based on that op-ed piece, Clarence and Us? So 4 months later, in the spring of 1992, I went to give the first lecture in what has been now evolving for 15 years. And, but that, by the spring of 1992, the lecture was called Clarence, William, Iron Mike, Magic, and Us. Because in those 4 months, William Kennedy Smith and Iron Mike Tyson had been accused of date rape. And Magic Johnson had revealed that he was HIV positive after he had, this is his word, not my word, accommodated more than 1,500 women. So I thought, okay, let's talk about HIV, let's talk about sexual assault, let's talk about all of these issues. So that's the evolution of this. And tonight, I consider the title of this lecture to be Clarence, William, Iron Mike, Magic, Senator Packwood, Propasi, Woody, Citadel, VMI, Luttrell, Aberdeen, Tailhook, Iron Mike again, President Clinton, Hootie, Kobe, Air Force Academy, Colorado football, Lawrence, Summers, Isaiah, and Us. 1 more month, and I'm going to have to stop and take a breath in the middle of that. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about that list that I just rattled off, right? Most of you know what most of those names are about. Because what I've just read to you is a kind of parade of men behaving badly in the United States over the past 15 years. Those are the icons. Those are the flashpoints in a renegotiation of the relationship between women and men in our country. And what I want to do is I want to address in some ways why we've had such a steady parade of these guys that are all familiar to us. Now, I'm a sociologist, as you heard. So those of you who have ever taken a course in sociology know that, you know, like most public speakers, they like to lead off with a whole bunch of jokes. We sociologists, we like to lead off with some data. I have some. What I'd like to share with you is just a couple of items from 2 surveys. These surveys were done in which both surveys asked 3,000 American women, well sampled for class, race, region, age, etc. They asked 3,000 American women what they thought about men. The first survey was done in 1970, and the second one was done in the year 2005. So what you're going to hear is the difference between what women said in 1970 and what they might say today. In 1970, I just have a few of these items, but you'll pick up the trend rather quickly. In 1970, 2/3 of the women agreed with the statement, men are basically kind and considerate. Now, 44% agree with that statement. In 1970, 41% of the women agreed with the statement, men's egos require that they put women down. Now, 58% agree with that statement. In 1970, 44% of the women said all a man really wants from a date is to go to bed. Now, 71% agree with that statement. And last, and maybe most telling, in 1970, 39% of the women said all a man is really interested in is his career, not his family. By 2005, after 35 years of the sensitive new father, the Cosby Show, etc., 56% of women said all a man is interested in is his career, not his family. So what's going on here? Is it possible that men are doing worse now than we were doing 35 years ago? I mean, that is one way you could read these data. But I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that these data suggest that men are doing so much worse. I think rather what they point out is the enormous changes in women's lives.